All right, well, thank you all for coming out. Let's see, that should help a little bit. So I think a couple of things. Most folks, I think, know our planning staff who's here, who works on this. And we're obviously here to highlight this challenge we have with dilapidated properties, rundown buildings in our neighborhoods. And this area is happening all across town. We know it's been a challenge in our city for decades, but we also know that we've made progress. For example, about 10, 20 years ago, we made a lot of progress on this issue. And I think most recently, we've lost a lot of ground. And so one of the priorities of our administration is to ramp up our efforts to deal with these properties. And that is a full range of pieces in that life of a property. We try and catch them before they get dilapidated, before owners are notified and so forth. We try and start as early as we can in the process. There are multiple notification points along the way. Today we're here to highlight the end of that process, which is when the city actually deems it necessary to bulldoze this building and remove it from our sort of cityscape. And there's a whole legal process that this property's been through. It's been noticed multiple times. This property has been the site of dozens of law enforcement calls. So it has unfortunately earned the right to be bulldozed. And the owner's been notified half a dozen times about this. And again, nothing was ever done by the owner. Also, there's been multiple liens put on this property. That's another tool that we use heavily. But in the end, if none of those work, we will, as a city, deem it as a public right and as important for public safety to bulldoze a property. So I'm going to pause right there. Air Force, Hercules, C-130. And so we wanted to be here today to showcase that we are caring again and we are following through. We're going to try and work with folks, first the tenants, then the owners, but when all else fails, we will take action. And that's why we wanted to highlight this today. And the other thing that I want to highlight is, we're here in the International District. This is my old state Senate district. I have literally door-knocked this street dozens of times. I have walked past this particular property. As long as I've been doing that, it has looked like this. And we know what happens in these properties. It's used for squatters. It's used for drug use rampantly. Unfortunately, this is all too common in our city. But we're going to stand up and we're going to start doing something about it. And for this particular property, it starts today. So we're going to actually kind of begin that process in sort of the same ceremonial way as we would a first shovel in the ground. We're gonna do the first steps of demolishing, and then if we want after, we can take a few questions. And so we'll gather around. Who's with me? I gotta put on my safety gear. One, two, three. That actually does the trick. All right.
Almost there.
But one of the reasons why we highlighted this property is because it fits kind of the average with which we like to do things. And, we respect personal property rights and these kinds of things. So we want to make sure and go through due process, but we also want to finish the job.
How many other projects like this does the planning department have on their radar? Like how many properties are sort of ready for red tag?
That's a good question. So on a rounded number, we have about 15 in the queue right now. And we actually did get some funding from council and through our administration. We are kind of prioritizing this, so we expect that number to get a little bit higher so we can sort of digest some more properties along the way, but right now we're at about 15.
And is that regular homes like this, or is it also sort of like businesses as well?
That's for regular residential. And I think one thing, last time we kind of worked on this issue, at least publicly facing, we were dealing with, the tagging sort of commercial properties. And so today we wanted to highlight, I should have said this in the beginning actually, we wanted to highlight what we do with residential properties. It's a different process than commercial. But now we're pursuing both. And again, that commercial track is a new track it's a new tool we didn't have available until the ordinance was passed.
You had mentioned that sort of in the past this had sort of not been as much of a priority. Now it's becoming a bigger priority. What does that like mean? Are you dedicating resources?
We are. Both our administration and council have dedicated more resources to this. And I think as we realize, we have to face our challenges head on and acknowledge where we're at. I think historically there was a little bit of, it wasn't a priority, meaning resources weren't being put into it. And also essentially just sort of administrative instruction and direction wasn't being paid attention to as much. So we're starting to track our metrics on this. We want to use this as also a way to measure either progress or lack of progress in dealing with a lot of our underserved neighborhoods and newer neighborhoods. And so this also tells us a lot about where we're at as a city. It had not been looked at that way in the past. I think it was more seen as an administrative process that was just kind of part of city business. Now it's a priority.
Do you know at all how Albuquerque compares with like other big cities with this problem?
We were just talking about that actually. We had a conference of mayors, some work that I did with other cities, and one of the areas that came up is what you do with these sort of dilapidated properties. And there's a full spectrum across America in terms of cities' progress on this. I do want to give credit. I think Albuquerque in general does a relatively good job on this relative to other cities. I think that actually came out in my discussions with other mayors. But we have de-emphasized it recently and we've lost some ground. And so that's why we're ramping it back up.
How will this affect crime in the area? Or what does demolishing a building like this do with regard to crime?
So one is it sends a huge signal that someone's watching and someone cares and somebody will follow through. So this is going to send a signal to this whole neighborhood that we're paying attention. And so that's for folks who perhaps were in here, drugs, prostitution, things of that nature, that obviously won't happen anymore. We know that obviously that can be moved elsewhere, but at least on this block, things are going to change. It also is a big signal to property owners. A lot of this area has absentee landlords, property owners, even from out of state. And we like to remind folks that you have to take care of your property. That is part of your obligations under city ordinances. And if you don't, this is what can happen. And so this is meant to send a strong signal and hold property owners accountable. And I think lastly, is someone again who used to represent this neighborhood. People want to know that we understand we have issues around poverty and around addiction. That doesn't mean there's an excuse for an abandoned house being used for drugs and prostitution. And so that's why we want to demonstrate that we will take action.
Talk to us about the neighbors. Did they have many complaints about this building? What does this mean for them now that it's finally happening?
I think neighbors, especially in this community, they want to see progress of some sort, whether it's new streetlights, whether it's new sidewalks, and this is part of our notion that we need to invest in our underserved communities. And then specifically on this property, because of the dozens of response calls from APD and fire department, those all came in from neighbors. So that notion of a nuisance in your neighborhood, this was a problem for everyone around here. All right, well, it's probably pretty good for now. Thank you guys, and I think again, if you want to look around, you can. Just be careful. Thanks.